why our buildings are changing shape, it's helpful to get to grips with a financial concept called liquidity. Stick with us, and Billionaires Row will start to make a lot more sense.
So all assets have varying degrees of liquidity. You can think of everything that is an asset as existing somewhere on a liquidity spectrum. And at one end of the spectrum is the most liquid asset of all. That is cash. $1 US bill is exactly the same as every other $1 US bill. You can hand it off.
You know, in some way you remind me of Vladimir Lenin. You see, Lenin literally became a Volcel. He took a vow not to drink or have sex in order to stay focused on the revolution. You are similar to Lenin in this way, in that you get no bitches. That's awesome. That's fucking funny. All right, sorry, I just had to read that. That was a good chat.
The end of the liquidity spectrum is real estate, a piece of architecture, often represented as a single-family home with a pitched roof.
Along that spectrum, you have things like artwork and stocks in companies like Tesla or Google.
So my argument is that the logics and practices of finance capitalism is to transform buildings in such a way that they move down the liquidity spectrum to become more like a stock, more like cash.
Enter Billionaires Row.
111 West 57th is an
These are the NFTs of housing, is what they're basically saying.
Yeah, so like, how do they like
almost turning?
Do they buy and sell these houses differently than regular places?
I mean, in the sense that like they are treated as like basically an asset that.
Do you know how?
It's an asset more than it is shelter.
Yeah, but he was saying, like, he was talking about the liquidity of the two assets and them wanting to make buildings and homes and shit, like that asset be more liquid, like a stock, like a share.
Do you know how like rich people buy and park their like works of art in airports?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so like if you look at the spectrum example,
you can come closer, bro.
No, I'm good, dude.
Come on, dude.
You would go from like artwork, which is you would go NFT artwork building, right? All same concept, just different efforts of transaction.
Yeah, that's what makes it more or less liquid, right?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Like obviously, it's still sold. It's still bought and sold in a similar capacity. It's still real estate. But it has its like unique market considering the barrier of entry into that market itself. And more importantly, I think the argument there is that this is seen as more of an asset, a speculative vehicle, and a way to park your cash into something rather than shelter. It's built first as predominantly an asset for the mega wealthy.
But don't forget
okay, so that also makes sense in terms of like the way that they want to like trade and sell it is it's just like a vehicle. Where they don't have to worry about like the time it's going to take for somebody to move in and out because one, no one's living in them, so they just fucking are trading these buildings and whatnot and buying them up as like little money pits.
And don't forget, it's insured. Like there's no losing here, right? Unless the entire economy goes, in which case you're already screwed.
Yeah.
But like even if the building burns down, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Incredibly tall building, but it has a very small number of units in it. All the units are either one entire floor or a unit that spans 2 floors. Gone is the hallway. You know, you're not going to smell the neighbors cooking. Maybe it's a pleasant smell, maybe it's not, but that's what social life in the city is all about. Gone are all the possibilities for that.
Now, not being able to smell your neighbour's dinner sounds kind of nice, but Matthew says it goes back to this concept of housing sliding closer and closer to something like cash on that liquidity scale.
What does this all mean? This means that you could own a unit in a building like 432 Park and almost never visit it, or maybe never go there, and you can be reasonably assured that it's going to be secure and not problematized by some unpredictable public usage.
With fewer units in the building, you can start to control more of those variables that typically make a house a non-liquid asset. There's no hallway because the elevator opens directly to the apartment. There's no backyard you've got to maintain, no street level windows to protect from vandals on the ground, no leaky roof that you've got to fix.
And you can see this across building types, not only the towers in Billionaires Row, but condominium units in Miami, in Vancouver, in Melbourne. But
what's up?
Remember when I talked about capitalism going too far?
Uh-huh.
I feel like this is what I meant.
I mean, it goes. I mean, so the thing is,
it's literally, let's build this building for the sake of putting our money in it because we know it'll go up in value over time. It's just min-maxing for billionaires.
Yeah, no, that's precisely what it is. But
that's all it is.
But the system is designed to get to this point, especially because the governments are. All governments formed under a capitalist organization of the economy, slowly but surely, without like genuine political mobilization and a genuine anti-capitalist action occurring, are always inevitably going to reach this state. Yeah. So much so that even some of the anti-capitalist actions the government takes in the form of like a more progressive tax system, for example, rather than a regressive one, as in like, you get taxed more the richer you get, right? Even that sort of stuff funds what is known as the welfare state, right? And welfare programs and things like that, which end up creating or breathing life back into the capitalist system's continuation, because inevitably the conflict between the two classes come to this point if unchecked under a capitalist organization of the economy. Yeah. Right? Like, it's always going to get to this point because the system is designed to get to this point. Right? Yeah. So sometimes you reel it back in an effort to like give people a little bit, just breadcrumbs, so they shut the fuck up. That's why really rich libertarians call welfare the riot tax. Do you get why they call it the riot tax? So that it don't. So the poors, so the poors don't fucking riot.
Here you go.
Yeah.
A little snacky.
And basically that.
Thanks for working all your life.
Like Marxists believe that this is what the system is designed to do.
What
and
it is.
It is designed to do this. Do they pay property tax at least? Would benefit the local schools. So the beautiful part about what you just described is that property taxes itself and the way that the taxes are distributed in most places in America also create a two-tiered classes system where public schools in wealthy neighborhoods end up being well-funded, having like access to greater forms of education, having iPads for every fucking child, whatever. Yeah. Versus poorer schools in or poorer neighborhoods that don't have that much property tax to offer to the school district, that has a fuckload more children to educate, end up getting underfunded consistently.
Yeah, it's not like they're fucking erecting this building in on 8 Mile so that, you know, DPS gets the money for the fucking property tax.
And certainly, I'm sure, considering the buyers of such properties, considering like who buys properties like this, I'm almost fucking certain. I haven't seen this video yet. I have no idea what and I don't know the background of this, but I'm almost certain that there is probably one way, shape, or form that these motherfuckers end up actually using this as a way to like lower their taxes as well. A lot of real estate developers, including Donald Trump, do shit like this because they add this into the depreciation. Like the value is like depreciating, or there is 100% of the building is actually something that you can use to cut some of your taxes. And if you have $100 million property, that's $100 million in taxes, depending on what kind of depreciation you can justify. That's a lot of fucking taxes that you can avoid paying.
Depreciation? What the fuck's depreciating?
Doesn't the U.S. I mean, I'm not.
What do you mean? The walls are getting older.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Doesn't the U? I mean,
Oh
I don't
my
know this for a
god.
fact, but I thought the U.S. tax
We're
code
fucked.
lets you write off the depreciation of any building in like 20 years or something.
You would know 2.7 million, right? Lil. Yeah, you got me.
It's pronounced in something like the Billionaire Row ultra thin towers.
Even with the money and the engineering to make buildings like this possible, you can't just put a super slender skyscraper up wherever you like. Developers need permission to get their projects off the ground, and there are restrictions.
Ne sordun? What did you say?
I had asked what the U.S. tax code, what's the duration of depreciation on a building is, and I think
I don't know.
said it was 25 years.
How tall they're allowed to build. But here in New York, there are a lot of different loopholes they can use to go beyond the limits.
To try and get my head around all this, I went to go and see Sam Stein. He's a senior policy analyst at the Community Service Society of New York.
I want to ask about incentive zoning. For anyone who hasn't heard of that, what is it? How would you describe it to somebody on the street?
First of all, zoning is the rules about what can be built where, at what height, and what width, and with how much space in between, etc. Incentive zoning says the developer can violate those rules to a certain degree if they do something else that is to the public's benefit.
Just to the west of Billionaires Row, New York City used zoning incentives with the Hudson Yards development to upgrade the subway, create new public parks, and expand the nearby
ugly.
Javits Center.
Is that in New York?
On Billionaires
Yeah.
Row, 157 got a tax break from building some affordable housing in the Bronx, but we'll get more into that later. Remember how developers bought up a bunch of air rights to be able to build even taller? Well, the way those rights are obtained typically means the developments are able to move forward without going through the usual public or environmental review process. The Municipal Art Society of New York put together a report called The Accidental Skyline, which looks at how the current New York City zoning regulations have enabled the rise of super tall skyscrapers across the city. This graphic shows the hotspots of unused development rights in 2014 and where new developments popped up a few years later. Billionaires Row sits right in the middle of one of these hotspots, here in Midtown Manhattan. 432 Park Avenue was able to rise so high in part because of another loophole in the city's zoning laws. Any floors used for mechanical or structural equipment don't count towards the total height of the building. And at 432 Park, roughly a quarter of its floors are reserved for equipment, not apartments. Now, there are legitimate reasons to have so much space reserved for mechanics. For one, the open-air mechanical floors allow wind to flow through the building in order to reduce any sway. And of course, you need space to store the heating, air conditioning, and elevator motors. But there's an ongoing debate about whether developers are exploiting the rule in order to build further into the sky. Is this great architecture or capitalist ambition? Can those be the same thing? Is that the very essence of New York?
For all the effort, money and planning that's gone into these buildings, it struck me just how many of the units seem empty. But once I started to look into it, it actually made a lot more sense, and it turns out there's a couple of different reasons for it. They're either unsold or simply unoccupied.
In fact, there are quite a few Billionaires Row properties still on the market. An analysis by Sirhan found that nearly half the units in 7 of the buildings were unsold in August. That's $6.7 billion worth of condos still on the market without a buyer. That might be because what was initially unique about 157, the Central Park views, floor-to-ceiling windows, and units sprawling an entire floor, was quickly replicated by the other super tools that popped up. Now, if you're in the market for an ultra-luxury apartment in Manhattan, you have a lot more options.
They got competition.
Well, there's a lot being built. Gloss of 157 it depreciates every year that new projects come through, and there's another, it building to live in.
For years, the luxury real estate market in New York City had more supply than demand. But that's starting to change. By September 2021, Manhattan hit record high sales of luxury properties.
Oh my god.
But what kind of intrigues me more is the empty units. They've been built, they've been sold.
Also, New York City or at least like the job of the New York City mayor since the 90s